Welcome to this episode of the Optimist Heart, a superb conversation between Clancy and Caroline Ward, hosted by Victor Purton and the Centre for Optimism. We hope you enjoy this warm conversation.
Thank you, Victor. Yeah. So, Kay, what I want to know is, do you want to read your post or would you like me to read it?
Oh, that's... You read it, Caroline.
Do you want me to read it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I may not give it the intonation that you would hope for. Everything is our own story, right? I pick it up and it's mine now. But open letter to the woman on the tram who told her daughter that she couldn't have any chocolate or she would end up like me. It was an attempt at a whisper, but it was a little too loud and they both looked over. Some would call me cuddly or curvy. I am overweight. The vessel I travel in isn't perfect, but it's mine. It holds the scars of childhood sexual abuse, the ravages of years with an eating disorder. It has beaten cancer, birthed two beautiful children, and fights arthritis daily. It has achieved many things with me and for me. People like you have stopped me from pursuing my passions on occasions, but mostly I can let it wash over me. I have less time left to live on this planet than I have already lived, so I choose my ripple more carefully these days. When you look at me, I hope you see my smile and feel my warmth. I hope you see my joyful heart beat, hear it sing, or join in with it when it dances. I hope you can accept that sometimes my ripple bursts through my body and I do all of these things publicly. My vessel is only my shell. It doesn't tell my story. Be kind. Do not judge others. Some can rise above your cruelty, others can't. Be the reason someone believes in themselves, not the reason they hide away. So, Kay, what I want to say is that when I read that, and every time I read it, because I've read it many times, I do not pick up in that any anger, no self-pity, no sense of victim, no sense of blame. It rises us, or lets us all rise up into some understanding that is very much understanding our social systems as well as our individual story. Can you tell us your day, how that happened? And I do want to say to people, you had no idea this was going viral. You just got on about your day, didn't you?
I did actually, and I had in the morning. It was International Chocolate Day, isn't that funny? And I had posted an optimism post, Victor, a soundtrack for optimism, to celebrate World International Chocolate Day, and somebody rang me and said, "Oh, your post is doing really well." And I said, "Oh, is it?" And I went into my International Chocolate Day post and I said, "Oh, okay." And in my head I was thinking, that's sort of similar, similar people responding, it's great, we're having fun. And they said, "Not that one, you goose, the other one." And so I think it's really hard. All right, let me rewind that. So I didn't have any expectation. What I had was a sense of reflection and a sense of isn't that sad? Isn't that really sad? And you get choices. You can choose to stand up and say, "That's disgraceful, how dare you," or you can choose to think about it and speak out about it as opposed to standing up against it. And so as I wandered back from the tram to my desk, what I'm really clear about is I don't think that woman was evil or mean or cruel. I genuinely don't think she got out of bed that morning and said, "I really must go and hurt someone today." That's not what happened. What happened was, in her position, and I don't know her, so I'm going to make some suggestions around what might have been happening if I stand in a place of good intention. So that woman I'm absolutely certain wants her daughter to grow up really well and safe and healthy and happy. And so the comment she made to her daughter would have come from a place of love. And love sounds like so many things. Love can sound like, for goodness sake, wash your face, get to bed early, what are you drinking, are you wearing that? There's a whole range of things that I love you can sound like. And so I think if you stand in a place of, I believe in good intention, then anger doesn't become your overriding emotion. And I think of this in a continuum that I call the curious furious continuum. So stuff happens to us, and sometimes we'll go to furious because we filter the thing through a whole set of inferences or interpretations, and then we land in furious. But if we just step back and we start with a balance of good intention, then I can move to curious. And that's, I think, what happened to me, Caroline, as I walked back from the tram. I was thinking about how we do this all the time, so how I do a keynote where I'll stand and say, so many of you haven't met me, but here's what you're thinking. Some of you are saying, I really like her hair. Gosh, that's a short skirt. I couldn't wear shoes like that. And so our processing of the world around us helps us make sense of it. And so I go to a place on the walk back of curious, I wonder what's happening. I wonder how it is we do that. I wonder, if I was to say, gosh, isn't this a strange thing we do? And what's the impact we have? What would that do? Would that help me express it? And so I just expressed my sense of just catch the ripple you have. And what do I mean by ripple? What I mean is the things I say and the things I do extend beyond the moment I say them or do them. And so they ripple out from us. And in the receiving of my ripple, people make meaning of that. So they make meaning that says something like, I'm not good enough, or I'm too fat, I shouldn't do this, I shouldn't go there. And the body shaming thing, I don't think it's it. I think it's every time we make a judgment. So if I go back, let me go back to, the mid-90s. I worked for the most beautiful human, like gorgeous human, wanted to be supportive, wanted to create great moments, wanted the people who worked with him to progress and to be successful. And he called me to a meeting and said, I just would like to give you some feedback, Kay. And I said, great, and I have my pen and my pad and I'm waiting for the words of wisdom to land. And he said, if you want to be successful, Kay, you're going to have to learn to be a bit more vanilla. Now, that was coming from a massive place of love from him, And so I go, vanilla, and I write vanilla down. And then for nearly 2 years, I do things like open my wardrobe and say, can I wear that? Is that vanilla? In meetings, I go to say something and I think, can I say that? Is that vanilla? And so something that came from a place of love, from his perspective, in terms of how do I help this girl succeed, became a ripple that impacted me. And so I think we have to balance our intention with how it will land. And so in the walk back from the tram, I just wanted to talk about how that had landed and give people an opportunity to just catch in their net a thought that was, perhaps this might not be kind. Perhaps this might impact somebody. And just create a moment of reflection.
Yeah, beautiful. I do have a question which I can't leave something you just said hanging out there, which is really trite in a way. Did you ever work out what vanilla meant?
I worked out what it didn't mean, and it didn't mean me, because I feel like there's times when I think Gail said, Kay sings in the office. I do. I'm so sorry. I do. I can't. It's who I am. Do I dance in the street? Hell yeah. If something touches, and so I worked out it's not me, and I worked out that it's perhaps a constraining of me. So I know what it's not. It's not where I feel constrained, where I feel like I'm hiding myself, where I feel like I'm not able to be who I am. And if I am the sort of person whose comfort zone is this size, that's fantastic. I'm not. My comfort zone is much bigger. And so vanilla might be fantastic if you're able to say, this is who I am and I'm comfortable here. Yeah. But it's not for me. So I guess the vanilla concept just didn't describe me and doesn't describe me. And I'm really okay with that.
Yeah, great. Now, one thing that you said when you first began, and I would like to pick up with this, because I think for me, in a world where we're becoming more and more divided, people are getting more and more angry, there's more otherness, we're othering all the time. It's, you know, and the divide between left and right and religions and cultures and ages and genders, everything is kind of polarizing extremely. I loved when you said something, I want to speak out about it rather than stand up against it. And something in our conversation the other day that it entered into that was when you said that, sorry, I had this thought come into my mind, doesn't matter. So, sorry, I was thinking about shaming and being embarrassed and all of those things, and how we can laugh about it when we get out of the vanilla construct, because I'd sent out this email and I talked about how this post, I meant to say elicited an avalanche of loving responses, but I wrote illicit love. And, you know, of course, it wasn't until I was about to doze off the other night, I went, oh, that was completely, how did I do that? And in the past, I would have been so embarrassed. And so I saw that note when I looked down at my paper. But what I wanted to say was, sorry, that distracted me. This whole thing about being able to, you said often we talk about, you know, people's strengths, where we focus on strengths, but you had this sense that day that this was something to speak out about, but not stand against. So I love this idea. Yes, it's good to be focused on strengths, but not only. We sometimes have to say. So you want to talk a little bit about that, because we have gone down a track of either completely damning people without knowing anything or with knowing, or being a little bit, you know, soft and just focusing only on the good things. But here you're naming something, but you're speaking out about it, and the distinction there. Can you kind of explore that a little bit?
Yes, I think so. What occurred to me on the day, and as things were moving, is that people want to be heard. They want to be seen. They want to be valued. They want to be included. They don't want to be judged. You know, that's the essence of the many beautiful and very moving and very, I'm humbled by how much people have shared with me. And I think there's something in that. There's something in the message that we have to take from that's what people want. People want to be able to live their best lives and contribute really, really well. And I think wherever we polarize, we don't get ourselves to a place where we can have a great discussion. And so I think that quite frequently we stand in a place that says, I'm right. You know, this is my view and I am right. And there's been some great work come out of Duke University. Professor Mark Leary's done some great work on intellectual humility, which I really love. And it sits in a place that says, I actually might not know everything. And to move to that space of I might not know anything and there might be something I can learn. And of course, that's really hard as well, because the more expert I am in my field, the harder it is not to hold on to the belief I know everything. The more mature I get, you know, the older I get in life, I've seen a lot. So it's really hard to stand in a place where I might not know anything, because I maybe I identify myself through my knowledge, through my knowing. And so I sort of blend that consciousness around I might not know everything with something my grandfather used to say when I was growing up. God gave you 2 ears in one mouth, use them in that ratio. And so in my head, if I bring those two things together, if I bring the ability to listen from a place of I might not know everything, and I add a little dose of I'm not standing in your shoes or looking at the world through your eyes, my listening might be even more intense. And then I get the ability to care about you. And so I think probably a message for leadership is that care matters. Yeah. And so, somebody said to me, define care. And I don't think care is something you can commoditize. I can't say, here's your 4 steps to care, go for your life and everyone will feel great. Because I think care comes back to what does the person in front of me need? And sometimes, Caroline, that is a conversation around choices that we make, So to your point, do I wrap you up and say, if the little girl wasn't overweight, but had she been, is the right thing to do to wrap her up and say, don't worry, darling, just eat what you like, it's all good? Or is the right thing to say, don't turn out like her? Well, no, neither of those are the right thing to say. The right thing to say in my consciousness is thinking about healthy ways of being, not just eating, but healthy ways of being, and role modeling some of those healthy ways of being, and just spending time having discussion that doesn't sit on the polar end of this is terrible and I'm angry, and doesn't sit on the end of don't worry, it's all right, darling, but sits in the middle of let's have a discussion that plays in where you're sitting, the lenses you're looking at the world through, the experiences you have, and just be kind and care. And if I care, and so what I also know is that busyness is now a badge of honor, so I'm really busy. And so no, I'm even more busy. Are you really? I got up at 3. Well, I got up at 2. Well, I didn't go to bed. And so, now we've got this kind of like busy. And if I stay in busy, I rush everywhere. And then my ripple is one of rush. My ripple is one of, I haven't got time for you. I can't listen to you. And so then I reduce my ability to notice where you didn't contribute, to notice that you had a furrow, to notice that you look like you haven't slept, to notice that you slumped. So my noticing is reduced. And so I come back to care and I say, if I care, I consciously slow down. And I might not have the time to stop and say to you, Caroline, you're looking a bit distressed, but I know to come back to you. And I come back to you and I say, this morning I was just dashing off to a meeting, but I did notice that you were. How are you going? And just introduce care, because then, Caroline, you feel like I'm interested and I care, and I have time for you, and I'm including you, and so you start the process of care. And then I need to remember. So the 2 ears and 1 mouth thing with a good memory. Then I have to remember that you tell me that your mum's not well. And so the next time I spend time with you, I say, how are you going and how's your mum? And so I have to run care as the underpinning program in my approach. And if I run care, I will go to wanting to understand what's happening for you rather than holding my fixed position and being angry at something you might have said or done.
Mm. Wow. Yeah, that is such a switch, isn't it? It comes with a level of kind of awareness, doesn't it? Because unless you naturally have that, but our cultural system of, especially in a working life today, is less about that and more about results and more about self-survival. And it's becoming more and more precarious. But the interesting thing that I've noticed in my experiments over the years in organizations with, groups and cultures, is that when you switch it to that point, and And I notice the difference when I do and when I've got caught up in the busy, right? But when I switch it and I'm really more present, like I'm here, and I can expand this moment. This moment actually becomes timeless, and time cooperates and collaborates when there's sort of right order in this moment. So if you need in this moment for me to be present, and I can do that, then everything else will work out after that. So it's a kind of paradox that people go, I don't have time for it. But actually, when you switch, it creates more time. Everything somehow moves in order around the right order of you're doing the right thing in that moment for that moment, like serving this moment. Do you find that?
I do. I really do. I worked with a most incredible senior barrister 2 years ago, and in one of our early sessions, maybe it was the second or the third session, she said, "Look, I'm learning to care. Look, I have tissues on my desk." And when we unpacked that, when we really explored that, it had never occurred to her that somebody might be moved to a state of stress and distress that they would cry. So there were never tissues. And she was like, "Oh, I don't know what to do with this now. Someone's crying." And so an evolution for her had been, there will be tissues. And then over the period of time we worked together, she recognized that if she's able to notice, then actually she might cancel her next 2 appointments, or she might extend the time, and so over time she learned what care looks like, because she stopped looking at it through her need. And her need wasn't to cry, her need was to get stronger and to fight harder and to be more cross. And what we discovered in our discussions was she would quickly transition from victim to perpetrator. So something would happen to her which would make her feel terrible, and then she would fight so hard against it that other people receiving the experience of her anger, and she was creating victims beyond her victimhood, if that makes sense. And so I think you're right. I think for her, there was a real moment of her recognizing that in translating things that happened to her into anger, she suddenly became the perpetrator. And in opening herself up to the possibility that other people are different, it starts with tissues, and it becomes a cup of coffee in a coffee shop, and it becomes, I've just cancelled my next meeting. And what she saw over time was a switch in how people react to her and respond to her. And she said, I was going through life so fast and so furious that it never occurred to me that people around me might need a bit of love. And she said, I just love my team now. I love working with them. They remember my birthday. They bring me a coffee if I'm busy. And I feel loved, and I feel like giving love. And, love is also very personal, Caroline, isn't it? Love and care are very personal things. And so you have to provide love and care, not through the bridge of your requirement, but through the receiving by the other person. And so we're back to, I have to listen, and I have to notice, and I have to just balance what I need with what other people need.
Yeah. So I want to go on a topic here where you, like, because if we say about caring for others, there's such a culture of a lack of self-care. And when there's a negation of the need for space and kindness to the self, and just downtime and ease in life, and understanding for that life has not always been so easy, and I have certain patterns and habits that are not necessarily ideal. But I can give myself a hard time on that. And then the result that impacts results, and then I got to go to medication, or I've got to or I cause damage. So to care for others, you also have to be able to do some self-care, right? Because if you're not caring at all for yourself, then you don't really know what to be doing either, or how to be being is perhaps a better way to say it. So how do you see, like, I think if we go back to the lady on the tram, I can imagine a story, like you say, you don't know her story, you don't know her, but you can make assumptions in a way to kind of make it understandable. And I can imagine her growing up with her family or her parents, and certainly the magazines and her friends, everybody compulsive about weight. We're a culture, a worldwide culture that's compulsive, and we're just getting bigger and bigger. So, and the emptiness sometimes that, gets covered by that. So I go back to this thing of self-care. What difference has that made for you? Because you named some significant things in your life that one would say need healing, need kindness, need addressing. So what do you think? You're a leadership expert, a culture expert. Where is self-care in all of this?
It's such a conundrum, Caroline, because my grandmother used to say, an empty jug can't pour, which I think is gorgeous, this concept that, I can't pour care unless I have care. But we don't value that, or we don't position that highly. And so what happens is I pour and and I'm not topping up. The dilemma is that the more I step into stress or worry, the less I feel like self-care. So, I might know that going for a lovely long walk with Gloria will make me feel fantastic, but I'm feeling so flat and so empty that I just can't pull from myself the desire or the will to get out there and do the thing that I know fills me up. So when I spend time with people and with leaders in particular, getting them to understand that they're running on parallel streams, so they're running to care for the people that work with them, but they also have to run a parallel stream of care for myself. So to care for you, I have to care for myself. And I've just seen somebody pop up in the feed saying, put your own oxygen mask on first. That's true, isn't it? And so actually having conscious conversations that talk about what you are going to do for yourself takes people time to get to, and to feel okay to say, well, actually, I'm going to go. And I worked with a chief executive a couple of years ago who goes fishing. And so when we talk about that, and I say to him, why do you go fishing? And he says, because the fish don't talk. And so I laughed, like huge laugh. And when I think about his day is filled with make this decision, come to this meeting, open this fate, kiss this baby, shake this hand, make a quick decision. And so for him, his care is take away the noise and no one talks. No one's going to talk to me. No one can even find me. Sometimes I go places where there's no signal, those kinds of things. And over the years, he has learned that the damage that he does to himself and those around him when he doesn't take that time is enormous. Now, the other thing is, because we're so busy coping, we want to cope and we want to be strong and all these things that we think we have to be, sometimes we need to understand our triggers, or sometimes we need a little friend to be that poke for us. And for him, it's his EA. So she spends so much time with him that she can say, and he says, okay, because he recognizes that sometimes he accelerates too quickly to notice. And so engaging some assistance or for somebody to just point to you. Now, everyone on the call, you will all be able to say, yes, I've had a disproportionate explosion to a small thing. We've all done that. And there's none so good at pointing those things out to us than the people we love and the people who love us. They'll tell us when we're unreasonable. And so it's being open to accepting those triggers and those messages for the times that we go beyond being able to moderate for ourselves. But it's about putting time in. So for some people I work with, we actually we systematize some of that. So, we block time in the diary for them to have their lunchtime walk. Bang. And do they do it every day? No. Do they do it a lot of days? Yes. And do they feel better? Yes. And so for some people, it's systematizing it. For some people, it's talking about it. And through the pandemic, we spend a lot of time talking to people about the distinction between checking in and checking up. So check up Zoom meetings look like, how's that delivery going? How's that project working? How's that piece of work you're doing? That's checking up, which has its place. But what's more and equally of importance is checking in. How are you? What have you done for yourself? What are you going to do for yourself? And being absolutely disciplined in that discussion, and giving space for that discussion. So some sessions that we hold, and I'll say, Caroline, what are you going to do for yourself this weekend? And Caroline goes dumbfounded, like. And so being okay to sit in listening, because the best friend of listening is silence. If I'm going to sit in listening, I just wait for you just to come to that. And you'll go, oh, I might go for a walk. That sounds fantastic. I've been for walks with people who are like that, Caroline, so I might go for a walk. How would it feel? How would you feel if I came with you? I could do with a walk. And so again, you're back to care, and you're back to how do we balance that? How do we give permission to care? So I was on a session with a leader who said, I don't know if I feel very comfortable with people, blocking out their diary to go for a walk. That's an interesting perspective. What makes you feel like that? Well, I'm just wondering about, does it mean that they're not going to be working? Are they going to take advantage? And so sometimes you have to just allow people to explore their thought process to get to it's okay. And we know there's so much research. We know that happy people perform better, happy people thrive. And so that balance of unpacking what's driving that thinking allows us to create the space. I had a message from somebody on Thursday who said, I've got to go and take the dog to the vets, but I will make up the time later. And that fear thing is so interesting. And as I look back over time and I say, this lady, she's just worked so hard all the time and gives so much. Actually, please take your dog to the vet and take the time you need and don't worry about it.
Yeah. Okay, Kay, there was like a masterclass in that on many things. And I want to shift now, but just before I do, because I like this idea of systematizing sometimes, because days pass, don't they? Especially when you just with a computer now. And I'll just do that, and then there's another Zoom, and then I'll just follow up that. And really, you can pass days not leaving the computer. And one of the things, many things, but, I've had a particular set of practices and path, awakening spiritual path for a few decades now. And one of the things that I've taken from that, which is very powerful, they call it traffic control. And every hour or a couple of hours, you set an alarm on your smartphone, and it's about controlling the traffic in your mind. And you just take a minute out. Sometimes it plays music, sometimes whatever, and you just stop. And you think it's just a minute, but boy, sometimes it's hard to give yourself a minute. You go, I'll just finish this, and then you never finish it. So it really is the discipline to go and let your system kind of come back in order. And in that sense, I want to say the value of that when you said about letting people process answers to questions themselves. So when you asked it, when this guy said about, well, I'm going to let people go for a walk. What if they're, what? And you said, interesting perspective, they're not going to. And then you said, you need to leave space, silence, for people to just work through it themselves rather than argue the point with them. Well, it's good. And I think this sort of thing of traffic control gives you space and more affinity with silence.
It does.
So you can leave silence in conversations, which, I'm extrovert, so my tendency is to talk, but I'm quite comfortable also while people process.
I love that. And I talk about that like punctuating your day. So sometimes I would reread an email before I send it, or read a proposal before I send it, and I'll add the punctuation it needs. I add the commas and the full stops. I create new paragraphs. Our minds sometimes need to do the same thing. So as you say, if I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed, just taking a comma, which might just be a stand and a stretch, or taking a full stop, which might be a walk to the kitchen to get a cup of coffee, or actually creating a new paragraph, which means I walk around the block. So just thinking about my mind, the processing in my mind also needs to have some punctuation there. The other thing that we know is that in terms of systematizing, it doesn't work for everybody, but if we can attach it to something that happens by routine. So I'm working with a team at the moment who have a stand up at midday, which is a has anything dreadful happened this morning stand up, and so they've attached a 15-minute stretch, walk, whatever they want to do, to the back of that, because that happens every single day. So they've all blocked out an extra 15 minutes and they do something with that. Now, do they all do it all the time? No. But it's a discipline of this thing's happening. And if I got into the routine of doing this 15-minute chat once a day, I can certainly, after my chat, I go, right, now it's time for me to have a cup of tea, have a stretch, go for whatever it is for me. And so thinking about attaching any new systems or processes to an existing routine can really help us. And even if we choose to ignore it, if it's there, there's just a piece of our mind that says, I said I'd go for a walk now. And there's a slowing down and a consciousness. So there's a choice to do the thing or a choice not to, but I've slowed down enough to decide. The other thing that's kind of interesting is, the whole physiological thing. So when I'm getting really busy or distressed or worked up, I tend to get a heat. There's a heat that goes with that because there's a speed that goes with that. And so, many of us will remember mothers, grandmothers, great-grandmothers saying things like, when you're feeling stressed, take a deep breath and count to 10. And that might have seemed like like an old wives' or old grandma's tale. But there's something physiological about taking a cool breath in when my body's heating up and just allowing myself. It's a mindfulness thing that wasn't called mindfulness. It was just your nana saying, stop being so stressed, take a deep breath and count to 10. But it works, and again, you're back to punctuating. I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. I'm just going to, and suddenly I just feel something shift. Like not huge. I'm not talking about suddenly Julie Andrews appears on the balcony and sings The Sound of Music. I'm not talking about that. We don't see rainbows and unicorns dancing, but we see something. And for some people, this is music. So for me, this can often be music. I'll put music on. I'll notice I'm in a fug, and I'll put music on, or I'll notice I can't make a decision. So I put some music on and I change my orientation. Then I come back and suddenly the thing seems easier. How many times have you done that? I play a Scrabble game with some friends in the UK. And sometimes I just can't find the word. I go, there's got to be something more than a 5-letter word. So I'll go and put some music on. I do something different. I come back and then the 73-letter word appears, because I've stopped focusing and stressing on it. So finding something that is that inflection point is really helpful.
For sure. Okay, so I want to shift tack a little bit and go. I love your practicality, by the way. I think you've got, a book of Kay and Kay's grandmother and mother and nana and auntie. You've got a book of many wonderful life tips that you could easily kind of offer there. Beautiful and real and practical, and I love it. I want to talk a bit about big systems and what happened in that post, because many people are trying to work out how to get audiences right. And you didn't even know you got such a massive thing going. And I know that there was one person who, sort of talked, well, clearly there's victimology going on here. And it was fascinating for me because I thought, wow, there were some people who were, yes, looking to and responding to your post as if you had been a victim. I didn't read victim in your post in any way. But some people went, oh, poor Kay, sorry it was like that for you. And they were being kind, but they had a sense that there was, and then this other person, but it was one person in more than 2,000. I, tracked through. And he wasn't even having a big go. He was just misreading it, I felt. So for me, something extraordinary happened that I put it was zeitgeisty because I think it's signaling something that at this time people want, need, and just want to be part of. And I've got some ideas, but I love to hear from you, and Vic, love you to jump in when we kind of open this up a bit too. What do you think happened that attracted so much energy there, Kay?
I think, Caroline, if I had to put a tagline to it, it might be something like, I'm okay as I am, or it's okay. And some people said things like, I've never wanted to talk about my hurt. And in private messaging to them, I said, you don't need to talk about your hurt, but you need to be human enough to say there has been hurt, because it's not about the hurt per se. So it's not about us unpacking who said what and in what point in my life that happened. It's actually about what it's made me feel. And I think there was something about unplugging that for people. I think also, Caroline, we talked about this when we were talking yesterday. I think in the COVID pandemic world where we are not with each other as often, some of the healing is missing. So if I'm in a meeting and somebody says something that I process hurtfully and I leave the meeting, there'll be people to salve me or to comfort me or to re-anchor me or to just reset my perspective, reframe my thinking. And so I come out very quickly balanced again or re-anchored. In this COVID pandemic Zoom world we live in, this thumbnail view that we are operating in, I come off that Zoom and that sense of hurt or whatever, however it translates, sits in me and grows. And so I think maybe some of what we're seeing, Caroline, we saw with the post is maybe an exhale, like it's all right. I can say that, I can be, it's okay. Somebody's talking and I feel like I can join. And there were people who wrote to me privately and said, I could never say this on the feed, but I want to tell you. And there were people who felt comfortable to say things on the feed. But I think we saw like an exhale, a sigh, a bit of relief, a thank goodness someone's saying something and it's okay. And I think it's all of those things wrapped up together. And that may not happen at any other time, may not have happened 2 years ago, may not happen in 3 years' time. Maybe it's just what's happening in the world and how we're feeling about ourselves. And, frankly, I have become very attached to my active wear. It serves me very well at the moment. And I did a face-to-face the other day and I thought, oh, that's a tiny bit on the tight side. And so I think, we're all feeling a bit of that at the moment. And so maybe it's a point in time thing, but we mustn't dismiss it as only a point in time, because people genuinely are saying, hear me, see me, value me, include me, and don't judge me.
Yeah, beautiful. And I think for me, Kay, there's something about the nature of our human spirit where we can all, I think we've lived in a culture of not enough, of not being enough, and because we don't think there is enough, that's full of comparison and competition, and it's a culture of criticism, self-criticism, criticism of other. It's an achievement culture. We're not enough. We've got to become better. We've got to become more. We've got to, it's exhausting and anxiety raising. And I think there's a lot of healing that is waiting to be done. For me, what happened, if I, do my projected read onto your post, and not just the post, but the sort of energy around it, was that it's a bit to do with what Brené Brown talks about, shame. When shame hides out in the shadows, when it's secret, it's very damaging. And I know you say we don't have to talk about the hurt, but I can say from my experience in running this retreat for 15 years, where everyday people have a companion and they actually get to speak out things that this is not a conversation, they just speak it and get heard. It makes these shameful hidden things, which are often not so shameful, but the story around it that we've told makes us hide, and once you speak it, you go, well, that was nothing, and the world didn't fall over and the face of the person listening didn't change from being compassionate and understanding and loving. And so I do think sometimes the processing of hurts, not sometimes, I do think we need to process hurts. And I think what you demonstrated was a very healthy process of speaking out about after having reflected upon, and no doubt having done lots of your own work in the lead up to it, so that you were not taking so personally, but able to, like you said, step back, understand the other story that was going on, that it didn't just begin there. There was a tale that was dragging behind it, that person was influenced and was influencing. And you went, you know what? We can change that. We can move upwards. And I think the human spirit in these times of what can appear very heavy moments where there's uncertainty and lots of changeability and increases in anxiety and depression and addictions and, fear and all those things. When someone shines a light and goes, you know what, you don't have to look at that in such a heavy way. You can look at it like this and you can say, wow, this is how it is. And I'm okay with that. Like you said, I'm okay. Or people just go, oh, yeah, I get that. I want that. We want to rise up. We want to be bigger, brighter than the smaller selves that society sometimes cultivates us to be in our busyness, in our lackness, in our kind of anger and our fear and control, all those things that belong to someone else's story that we've been conditioned by. And what you did was you did truth-telling about, and you gave a healing process on the way. And I think that people just went, oh, I'm there. Like not even at a conscious level sometimes. They just went, it's like their bigger self, their spirit went, I get that, thank you, So I feel there's a movement around that when we're a little bit, made in some ways housebound or impotent to keep going with our normal track. There's a big pause, the big pause button, and in that big pause button, something like what you offered said, that makes sense. Thank you. That's what I get from it. And I hadn't processed it properly. That's why it became a very long thing I just said. But I think it's like that for me. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Victor Purton, what do you think happened? Because I think you're up to about 30-something thousand posts, reactions, and more than 2,000 comments. And what do you think is happening, Vic? We can't hear you.
I know. It's the ultimate sin of modern Zooming. I actually added a comment because in my life of politics, you got very used to being insulted and just laughing it off. My nickname at Parliament was Smiley. So it was just, and as one of my then colleagues said to me, what, I'll use a swear word, I'm sorry, what used to give your enemies the shits was you would walk into the room and smile at them. and ask them about their kids and ask them about their lives. So, and then I door knocked, I think, around 40,000 houses over various campaigns. And, you know, generally people were so friendly. You know, they'd invite you in for a beer or scones, or they'd just express surprise that a politician would knock on their door. And sometimes you'd feel like you were in a movie about, you know, repeating time, because you had actually knocked on their door 5 years earlier and you knew you had, because you had it in front of me. But all you needed was one person to be nasty, right? And it could be in the midst of 20 or 25, and you would dwell on it. Mm. And so, you know, I mean, I've read a lot of psychology about this subsequently, and, you know, I'm constantly reading material, but it is just that bit of nastiness, and, you know, the crazy person who's rude impacts on you. And I'm reading the book Factfulness by Rosberg, you know, the Swedish doctor who died just before he finished the book, and his kids have finished on. And he talks about that negativity instinct. You know, you see it in the media, you know, the headlines that garner the click-throughs are the nastiest, the meanest, the worst stories. So there is a human reflex to respond to meanness and harshness. And, you know, that's part of what, you know, I do. Every day we're giving people stuff to make them more optimistic, you know, and, you know, the habits of optimism. So, yeah, as I read, you know, I just thought to myself, oh, yeah, Vic, you built a skin that was 8 inches thick, you know, the hide of a rhinoceros. But a nasty comment would still keep you reflecting for hours, if not days.
Yeah. Look, I would like to, the last 10 minutes or so, open up, if anyone wants to come on up into, if you've got anything you'd like to add in, any question, any... but meanwhile, Kay, what would you wrap up? I love your LinkedIn byline, which is so simple, just say creating ripples, you know, ripples, which, you know, other people will call it's an atmosphere, it's a vibe, but you touch everyone, whether you're conscious about it or not. So what would you wrap up our conversation today? And then we'll invite other people up into the room. And
I would say we all ripple, all of us. The things we say and the things we do create a ripple. And so create moments to be conscious about that is really important. The other thing I would say is be gentle with yourself, because we're human. And there will be times when we will say things or do things. And so being kind and gentle is also really important, because that's being forgiving. So be forgiving. We will create ripples that have unintentional consequences. We will say things that have unintentional consequences. So just be kind and gentle and forgiving and conscious. Because it would be awful if people went away and said, oh, God, I was that woman on the tram and it's awful. No, just like breathe into it and choose a different orientation. Just practice curiosity. We can practice these things. Practice curious, practice compassion, practice the things that will best serve you in catching those thoughts, because they're a part of our lives as we process the world around us. Practice the things that will allow you to catch the thought, to release the thought.
Beautiful. And you know, Kay, I wrote somewhere that I have no doubt if that woman on the tram in another context was reading your post and she hadn't been that woman on the tram on that day, but on another day might have, she would have been, you know, oh, that's terrible. And would have responded with kindness too, because we have capacity for all those things, right? And so it's not about demonizing her. It's about understanding the system has created many of her. Like in some ways we're all her. So I think, you know, and she is us. And I think I love this. It's like, where can we stop to choose our ripples? Beautiful. So Vic, are we inviting anyone up?
We are indeed, but first I'd just like to say thank you. This has been just so good, just so wonderful, so inspiring, and you know, you are two women in my life who just inspire me. You know, the optimism of the heart, you know, really reflects everything you are, Caroline. And I know you sometimes see me writing, you are the optimist heart. And so it was just such a wonderful piece of serendipity for you to ring me yesterday and to do this. And Kay, you know, you are just such a font of optimism and good sense. So on behalf of everyone, because we've had hundreds of people from all around the world join us, both on Zoom and on Facebook and the like. And of course, this will spread as we reproduce this on video. There's been messages of people who said, oh, look, I couldn't get there because it was a sleep time during Europe. Will you be on video? So thank you both. And we welcome other people on board to share some of their views and their wisdom and to ask both of you questions. I hope you enjoyed that episode of The Optimist Heart. If you'd like to watch back episodes, there's so many vibrant episodes with leaders from all continents and amazing people in business and from the United Nations, in environment, in spirituality, leaders in music and civic engagement. So centreforoptimism.com, you'll find the back episodes of The Optimist Heart. We'd love you to get involved with the Centre for Optimism. Again, you can register for a free newsletter, or better still, we'd love you to become a member. Have a great day. Yours in Optimism.